Hi, I'm Peter Stone, and pleased to be talking to you today about some joint work with colleagues of mine at Sony AI and at University of Texas at Austin. And as you know, at Sony AI, our main focus is on unleashing human creativity. But as with many people this year, the global pandemic caused us to think about what ways we could contribute our expertise in reinforcement learning to helping mitigate some of the crisis. And so the focus of this work is trying to manage the impact of COVID-19 by exploring sequential strategies or policies, which is the basis for reinforcement learning. And in particular, just from a high level, if you look at these three graphs, you're probably well familiar with these. That notionally, if the yellow line here is the hospital capacity in a region, and the red line is the number of critical patients. If you don't do anything to mitigate the pandemic, then typically the curve will go above your resources, and so the goal is to try to figure out what policies we can put into place to flatten the curve and to make it so that the need for hospital resources never exceeds the capacity. But ideally, you'd like to do that in a way that allows things to stay as open as possible. And so our goal is this bottom, the bottom curve, where the top one is the one where if you take no actions, the middle one is if you locked everything down and kept everything locked down, you could flatten the curve. And the question we ask is whether you could sort of open and close things at different schedules to try to never overgo your capacity in the hospitals, but to keep things as open as possible. And so how do we do this? We built an agent-based scenario, an agent-based simulator that's publicly available, and released it to everybody to try to build on. It models multiple locations with different characteristics, different categories of people, stateful behavior for each category. And the goal is to try to learn a policy for making decisions that will minimize the impact of the pandemic. And this could be COVID-19, it could be any future pandemic as well. And we want to evaluate the effects of these decisions. So the simulator is a discrete time simulator. It advances in steps representing 1 hour. And it models specific locations in a town, things like grocery stores and hospitals and schools. It also models people of different demographics, basically their age, what job they hold. They're divided into households according to sort of normal demographics from a particular area. We use the Austin demographics, Austin, Texas. There's a standard SEIR infection model, which I'll talk a little bit more. There's COVID, a testing strategy, contact tracing, and then the decision-making authority is the government that can make population-wide decisions, and we want to try to explore what they ought to be doing. So to give you a sense of this, you can see this, a run of the simulator here, where this is a small scale simulation where there's 200 people and 60 homes. The homes are these little squares. There's one grocery store in this town. As you zoom in, you see the tiny squares in various locations. Those represent the people. In this example, there's just 2 offices, 1 school, 1 cemetery, and they're just going about their routine. There's no lockdowns at all. So here you see in the evening, they go back to their houses. During the day, they go on, and then we can graph over time the number of people who are susceptible, who are exposed, who are infected, who have recovered, and so on. So the simulator operates, as I said, in 1 hour per step. It models people, what they do during the course of the day, according to their age and demographics and jobs. They can get tested. So that gives us some partial information of who's infected in any given time. That's what's given as the observations to the government. Then they can take actions to update the rules, like how much a location should be open or closed, should restaurants be at 25% capacity, things like that. And there's also an infection model. So some examples of location rules, there's grocery stores can be opened or closed, offices can be locked or unlocked, or schools, same with hair salons. The hospital is open at all times, and then these rules can be modified based on government decisions. So how many people, what hours they'll be open, and what capacity they're allowed to operate at. And then people have stochastic behaviors. So a working person goes to an office during the day, a child goes to school, people go to grocery stores periodically. We also model at night that people will go to social events, and those can, the size of those social events can be modulated based on government policy. People go to the hospital as long as there's capacity if they need it. And it also models that not everybody follows the government regulations, that it's probabilistic. Some people will flout the regulations. And then there's the contact rates in the simulation are modeled. There's probabilities of interactions among people in the same location. There's different probabilities for workers with workers, or workers with customers, or customers with customers. So 3 different contact rates within the grocery store. And again, these contact rates also depend on sort of government policy. So whether, you know, how many people are in a location, whether their mask wearing is mandatory, things like that. And also, I should say that the spreading, the spreadability of a person is drawn from a normal distribution, so we can also model things like super spreader events as being, you know, sort of less likely and more likely that people, you know, don't transmit as much. Then within the simulator, the simulator tracks the state of each person, the state of each location, the current level of regulations, and also a global testing summary that can be passed to the government. We use, like I say, a standard SEIR model. It models people as being either susceptible, exposed, infected, or recovered. Our collaborators at UT Austin from Lauren Meyer's group are first-rate, nationally renowned epidemiologists. So we're using is, you know, a very realistic model here, according to their advice. And you know, you can think of it as sort of a finite state diagram for individuals. They transition to the exposed state, and then they can be infected, and the severity can be modeled. Then they can either recover or pass away. The probability of infection is calculated based on the actual contact. So people actually move around during the simulation, and then depending on who they come in contact with, they'll be, you know, they'll either, with some probability, if they were infected, will catch the virus. There's an incubation period modeled, and as I said, you can the spreading rate is not uniform. It depends. It's drawn from a distribution for people. So some people have higher, you know, sort of become super spreaders. The government actions are modeled after the actual actions that are used in the city of Austin. So there's different stages. Stage 0 is fully open. Stage 5 is fully locked down. We actually only model four stages other than stage 0. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know, they determine how big gatherings can be for people who are high risk or low risk individuals, et cetera. And then we implement in our experiments reinforcement learning, and we have an OpenAI Gym interface that allows people to implement their own reinforcement learning in here. We've done a bunch of experiments with towns of about 1,000 or up to 10,000 in size, with, you know, sort of numbers of homes and stores and things as shown here. And then the rewards during our RL experiments are there's negative rewards if you go beyond the hospital capacity, and also negative rewards for going to higher stages. So it incentivizes trying to keep businesses open as much as possible. And we can also penalize sort of large fluctuations in the regulations as well. The RL agent does collect data. It updates it using, we use an SAC algorithm at first, but you could use, you know, experiment with other algorithms as well using our open source simulator, and you know, tries to learn a policy. It takes about half an hour to train a policy for 100 days with a town of about 1,000 people on standard computing. So just to see the baseline, this is a stage 0 policy. So this shows if there were no regulations in our simulation, then there's a big peak that you know, exceeds the hospital capacity in terms of the number of critical patients. The cumulative reward goes down, you know, very sharply because of the time when there's too many sick patients. And this just shows you what regulation you're at. We're at 0 the whole time. In comparison, if we go up to regulation 4, we're able to keep the the critical patients from exceeding the capacity, but you get negative rewards for staying at stage 4 the whole time. Our learned stochastic policy is able to sort of keep under the capacity the entire time, but it has much better rewards. It sort of goes up to stage 4 and then gradually ramps it down back to stage 0 to control the infection. So as I said, you can find the simulation itself. It's in Python. If you go to our paper here that was presented at the AAAI Fall Symposium on AI for Social Good, there's a link to our GitHub repository. We encourage people to check it out and try it. There's a whole bunch of possible future work as listed here, conducting larger experiments, trying different reinforcement learning algorithms, post-processing the network results for explainability, adding all kinds of higher fidelity modeling of schools or different types of locations and things like that. So we welcome your contributions, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.